What if the most expensive wedding of the year ended with a bride dead before the sun rose? Tonight, I'm taking you inside a story that shocked the Middle East and changed marriage laws forever. We're talking about Sheikh Tariq bin Hamad al-Qadi and Samira Nahar, a couple who seemed destined for a perfect life together. Their wedding cost more than most people make in a lifetime. Gold, diamonds, celebrity guests, and enough luxury to make royalty jealous. But here's what nobody knew as they celebrated. The groom was about to become a murderer. Have you ever kept a secret from someone you love? Maybe you thought you were protecting them, or maybe you were protecting yourself. We've all been there, right? That moment when you wonder if the truth would destroy everything you've built together. Well, Samira Nahar made that choice. She kept one secret from her new husband, something from her past that she thought was buried forever. In her mind, it was harmless. Just a chapter that was already closed. But when Sheikh Tariq found out about it on their wedding night, it triggered a rage so violent that it ended with her lifeless body on their honeymoon suite floor. Before we go any further, if you're someone who values truth and believes every victim deserves their story told, hit that subscribe button right now. Don't be the person who stays silent when voices need to be heard. These stories matter, and your support helps me keep bringing them to light. Also, download your ebook titled 50 Signs of a Toxic Relationship and How to Protect Yourself by clicking the link in the pinned comment. Here's what makes this case absolutely terrifying. Samira's secret wasn't even that shocking by today's standards. But in Sheikh Tariq's world, it was enough to justify murder. And the way he killed her, the evidence investigators found, it will make you question everything you think you know about honor, love, and the deadly price of keeping secrets. So what was the secret that cost a young woman her life? And how can you make sure something like this never happens to someone you care about? Stay with me because what I'm about to reveal will change how you think about honesty in relationships forever. Let's get into it. October 15th, 2019. The Azure Crescent Hotel in Dubai transformed into something from a fairy tale. This wasn't just any wedding, this was the social event of the decade. We're talking about a celebration that cost $12 million. $12 million. The guest list read like a who's who of Middle Eastern royalty and international celebrities. Princes from Saudi Arabia, oil magnates from Kuwait, tech billionaires from Silicon Valley, and even a few Hollywood A-listers who flew in on private jets just for the party. The hotel's entire 56th floor was reserved for the couple, while their guests occupied the floors below. But let me paint you the full scene of this extravaganza. Crystal chandeliers that cost more than luxury cars hung from every ceiling. The flowers alone, imported white roses, jasmine, and rare orchids, carried a price tag of $500,000. Professional dancers performed traditional dabkeh, while a full orchestra played everything from classical Arabic music to modern pop hits. The bride, Samira Nahar, looked absolutely radiant. 26 years old, Oxford-educated, and stunning in a custom-made gown that took 8 months to create. Swarovski crystals were hand-sewn into every inch of the fabric. Her jewelry, a matching set of diamonds and cashmere sapphires that belonged to Tariq's grandmother, worth more than most people's houses. Sheikh Tariq bin Hamad al-Qadi, the groom, was the definition of perfection that night. 32 years old, standing 6'2" in his traditional bisht robe decorated with gold threading. His family owned oil fields, real estate empires, and enough influence to make international headlines. Educated at Cambridge, fluent in 5 languages, and known for his charitable work building schools across the region. To everyone watching, they were the perfect couple. Samira's family had built a shipping empire worth billions. Tariq's bloodline traced back to desert royalty. Their marriage contract included a dowry of pure gold bars and a deferred payment of $28 million. Money Samira would receive if the marriage ever ended. The celebration went on for hours. Professional photographers captured every moment for magazines across 3 continents. Social media influencers live-streamed the reception to millions of followers. The cake alone was a work of art, 5 tiers decorated with edible gold and real pearls. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I love connecting with my global crime family. At 1:30 in the morning, As the last guests filtered out, Tariq and Samira posed for final photos in the hotel lobby. She was laughing at something he whispered in her ear. He had his arm protectively around her waist, looking every inch the devoted husband. The hotel staff who cleaned up afterward would later tell police they'd never seen a more beautiful wedding. The couple seemed genuinely in love, stealing glances at each other throughout the night, holding hands during the ceremonies, sharing private jokes during speeches. But here's what nobody knew as they watched this fairy tale unfold. Within 3 hours, one of them would be dead. Within 6 hours, the other would be in handcuffs. And by sunrise, this palace of romance would become a crime scene that would make international headlines for all the wrong reasons. The transformation from dream wedding to nightmare murder scene happened faster than anyone thought possible. To understand why Samira kept her secret, you need to know who she really was beneath all that designer silk and family wealth. Samira Nahar grew up between two worlds. Her father controlled shipping lanes from Qatar to Morocco, but her mother was an architect who believed in breaking traditional boundaries. This meant Samira spent her childhood summers in Algiers learning poetry and philosophy, while her school years happened in London's most exclusive private academies. At 18, she earned a full scholarship to Oxford University to study international relations. This wasn't just impressive. For a young woman from her background, it was revolutionary. Her parents were proud but nervous. Education was wonderful, but they also worried about the influences she might encounter so far from home. They were right to worry, but not for the reasons they expected. In her second year at Oxford, Samira met Arjun Malhotra. He was 21, studying economics, and came from a middle-class Indian family in Birmingham. Nothing about him fit her world back home. No royal bloodlines, no oil fortunes, no connections to the families her parents socialized with. Just a brilliant mind, a kind heart, and the ability to make her laugh until her stomach hurt. For 6 months, they were inseparable. Study sessions turned into long walks through Oxford's ancient streets. Coffee dates became weekend trips to London museums. What started as friendship bloomed into something deeper, something that made Samira feel free in ways she never had before. And here's where the fatal mistake happened. They got married. Not in some grand ceremony, nothing like what we saw at the Azure Crescent. This was a simple registry office wedding with 2 friends as witnesses and rings they bought at a vintage shop for £30 each. Samira wore a blue dress she already owned. Arjun borrowed his roommate's tie. The whole ceremony took 15 minutes. For exactly 4 months, they lived as husband and wife in a tiny flat near campus. Samira had never been happier. She was living her own life, making her own choices, free from the expectations that had followed her since birth. But reality has a way of crushing dreams. Her father's business partner spotted them holding hands outside a London restaurant and immediately called Qatar. Within hours, Samira's phone was exploding with calls from family members demanding explanations. Her father flew to London personally, and the conversation they had changed everything. He didn't shout or threaten. He simply explained what this marriage would cost their family. Business partnerships worth hundreds of millions would dissolve. Marriage proposals from suitable families would disappear forever. Her younger sisters would suffer the consequences of her choices for decades to come. If you're still watching and you believe women deserve to tell their own stories, prove it by subscribing. Too many people scroll past stories like Samira's without understanding the impossible choices they face. The annulment happened quietly and quickly. Expensive lawyers made the paperwork disappear into legal archives where nobody would ever find it. Arjun, who genuinely loved her, agreed to the separation because he could see the pain it was causing Samira to choose between him and her entire family. When Samira returned to Qatar, she threw herself into the life her parents had planned. She attended the right parties, met the right families, and when Sheikh Tariq's representatives approached her father about a marriage proposal, she said yes. But here's what made this secret so dangerous. Samira genuinely fell in love with Tariq during their engagement. What started as duty became real affection. She convinced herself that her past with Arjun didn't matter anymore because her feelings for Tariq were stronger than anything she'd experienced before. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. Now let me tell you about Sheikh Tariq bin Hamad al-Qadi, because understanding his background is crucial to grasping why he became a killer that night. Tariq was born into a world where reputation meant everything and forgiveness meant nothing. His father ruled a province in the Northern Emirates where tribal law still held more weight than modern courts. From the moment Tariq could walk, he learned that his family name was sacred, and protecting that name was more important than protecting human life. The al-Qadi bloodline traced back 12 generations to desert warriors who conquered territories across the Arabian Peninsula. Every male child born into this family carried the weight of that legacy. Honor wasn't just a concept, it was oxygen. Without it, you suffocated. Tariq's childhood was a masterclass in contradictions. In public, he was the perfect prince. Generous to a fault, he handed out gold coins to schoolchildren who earned top grades. He funded medical clinics for poor families and built mosques in remote villages. International media loved him, calling him the modern face of Arabian nobility. But the people who worked closely with him saw a different side. Palace staff whispered about his explosive temper when things didn't go exactly his way. A horse trainer once made the mistake of serving him tea in a chipped cup. Tariq had the man fired and banned from working anywhere in the Emirates again. His polo instructor told friends that Tariq would beat his horses bloody if they failed to perform perfectly, then donate millions to animal charities the next week. Gardeners learned to hide when Tariq was in a bad mood because he would find fault with perfectly maintained lawns just to have someone to blame for his frustration. The women in his family enabled this behavior because they understood the system. His mother, grandmother, and sisters all agreed that Tariq's harsh expectations came from the enormous pressure he faced to maintain their family's status. They made excuses for his cruelty and convinced themselves that marriage to the right woman would soften his edges. This is where the arranged marriage tradition becomes deadly dangerous. Tariq's future wife wasn't just choosing a husband, she was agreeing to become the guardian of his family's honor. Every choice she made, every secret from her past, every mistake she might have committed would reflect on the al-Qadi name forever. In Tariq's mind, his wife had to be absolutely perfect. Not just beautiful or wealthy, morally flawless. Her past needed to be a blank page where he could write their future together. Any deviation from this standard wasn't just disappointing. It was a betrayal of everything his ancestors had built. The marriage proposal to Samira's family took months of negotiation because Tariq's representatives investigated every aspect of her background. They spoke to her professors at Oxford, verified her academic achievements, and even tracked down classmates to ask about her behavior during university years. But here's the crucial detail they missed. Nobody investigated her marriage to Arjun because the annulment had been handled so discreetly that it left no public traces. The lawyers Samira's father hired were experts at making inconvenient truths disappear from official records. Have you ever known someone who seemed perfect on the outside but had a different side behind closed doors? Let me know in the comments because this personality type is more common than you might think. Tariq genuinely believed he was getting a perfect bride. In his mind, Samira represented everything he deserved. Beauty, intelligence, family wealth, and most importantly, an untouched reputation that would enhance rather than threaten his own standing. What he was about to discover would shatter that illusion in the most violent way possible. 2:17 a.m. The penthouse suite at the Azure Crescent Hotel was finally quiet after hours of celebration. Hibiscus petals created a romantic trail from the elevator to the bedroom. Champagne chilled in crystal buckets. Candles flickered on every surface, casting a warm glow across marble floors and silk curtains. This was supposed to be the beginning of their happily ever after. Samira disappeared into the massive dressing room to change out of her wedding gown. The dress had taken 3 people to help her into it that morning, and getting out of it was just as complicated. She called out to Tariq, her voice playful and tired. 5 minutes, Your Highness. I need to breathe again. Tariq stood alone in the main suite, loosening his formal robes and scrolling through congratulatory messages on his phone. Business partners, royal relatives, and government officials had sent hundreds of texts celebrating the marriage. Everything was exactly as it should be. That's when Samira's phone vibrated on the console table where she'd placed her clutch. The screen lit up with an international number Tariq didn't recognize. What caught his attention wasn't the number itself. It was the red heart emoji that appeared next to it. His wife was receiving late-night messages from someone important enough to earn a special symbol in her contacts. Curiosity turned to suspicion in seconds. Tariq had watched Samira enter her passcode dozens of times throughout the evening. The same 4 digits she'd used to unlock the phone for photos, payments, and social media posts. He typed them in, 0-4-1-5. Her birthday. The phone unlocked immediately. His eyes scanned the notification screen. Group chats about wedding planning, messages from bridesmaids, florist confirmations, all normal. But there, buried among the everyday conversations, was a thread labeled Arjun M. Tariq's blood pressure spiked. Who was Arjun M? And why was this person messaging his wife on their wedding night? He tapped the conversation. 3 years of silence, then tonight's message. Proud of you, Sam. Whatever happens, remember you were brave. Brave? Brave about what? Tariq scrolled up through older messages. Casual conversations about studies, shared jokes, and then something that made his hands shake. Voice messages from 3 years ago, where a man's voice called Samira, my wife. His wife. Another man had called Samira his wife. But it got worse. Much worse. At the bottom of the conversation thread was a PDF file. The title made Tariq's vision blur. Annulment Decree 219-2016 PDF. He tapped the file with trembling fingers. Official letterhead from Westminster Family Court appeared on the screen. Legal language in formal English. And there, in black and white, the truth that destroyed everything. Marriage between Samira Nahar and Arjun Malhotra dissolved by mutual consent. Every lesson about honor his father had beaten into him came flooding back. Every speech about family reputation, every warning about the sacred nature of marriage, every threat about what happened to men who allowed their bloodlines to be contaminated. Samira had been married before. She had belonged to another man. She had lied to his face, to his family, to the imam who performed their ceremony, and to Allah himself during their wedding vows. If you're still here with me exploring every detail of this case, drop truth in the comments so I know you're following along. The rage that consumed Tariq in that moment wasn't rational or controllable. It was generational fury passed down through centuries of tribal law. In his mind, Samira hadn't just lied about her past. She had stolen his honor, destroyed his family's reputation, and made him a laughingstock among the very people he needed to respect him. He could hear her humming softly in the dressing room, completely unaware that their marriage was about to end in the most violent way possible. She had no idea that her new husband was transforming from loving groom to cold-blooded killer. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Arjun. I hope Tariq treats you well. You deserve happiness. That final message sealed Samira's fate. In Tariq's fractured mind, this wasn't just evidence of her deception. It was proof that she was still in communication with her former husband, still connected to the man who had stolen what should have belonged to her real husband. Samira emerged from the dressing room expecting to find her husband waiting with champagne and celebration. Instead, she found him holding her phone, his face twisted with a hatred she had never seen before. Her world was about to end, and she didn't even know why yet. Samira stepped out of the dressing room barefoot, her heavy wedding gown replaced by a silk robe the color of champagne. Her hair was down now, falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She looked radiant, relaxed, ready to begin her new life as a married woman. The smile died on her face the moment she saw Tariq. He was standing by the console table, her phone gripped in his fist like a weapon. His eyes held a fury she had never witnessed before, not during their courtship, not during the stress of wedding planning, not ever. This was the look of a man who had just discovered betrayal. Tariq. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Why are you looking at my phone? He turned the screen toward her. Arjun's message glowed on the display. Proud of you, Sam. Whatever happens, remember you were brave. The blood drained from Samira's face. Of all the nights for Arjun to reach out, of all the messages he could have sent, This was the worst possible timing. She opened her mouth to explain, but Tarek's voice cut through the air like a blade. You were married to another man. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation delivered with the weight of absolute certainty. Samira's knees went weak, but she forced herself to stay standing. Tarek, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you lied to me. How you lied to my family. How you made a fool of me in front of everyone I respect. His voice grew louder with each word. You polluted my bloodline. Samira stepped forward, hands raised in a gesture of peace. It was annulled. I was young, it lasted for months. It meant nothing. Nothing. Tarek's laugh was harsh and bitter. You stood before Allah and promised me your purity. You looked my mother in the eye and accepted her blessing. You let my family pay a dowry for damaged goods. The words hit Samira like physical blows. She had expected anger, but not this level of venom. Not this complete rejection of everything they had built together during their engagement. The marriage contract is still valid, she said desperately. We can speak to religious authorities tomorrow. There are rulings that... There is only one ruling for dishonor. Tarek hurled her phone across the room. It crashed into a crystal vase, sending both objects exploding into glittering fragments that scattered across the marble floor. Samira flinched, pressing herself against the wall. Fear replaced confusion as she realized this conversation wasn't going to end with forgiveness or understanding. The man she had married just hours ago was looking at her like she was his enemy. Tarek, think about the families. Think about the business partnerships. Gold can't buy back shame. He moved toward her, his formal robes making him look larger and more threatening in the candlelight. This is why I cover these stories, to give victims like Samira a voice. If that matters to you, subscribe and let's honor her memory together. Samira ran. She darted around the king-sized bed, her bare feet slipping on scattered rose petals. Table lamps crashed to the floor as she bumped into furniture. The romantic lighting system flickered and strobed as voice activation sensors tried to process the chaos. She reached the suite's main door and fumbled with the electronic lock, but Tarek's hand closed around her wrist before she could escape. He spun her around with violent force, and she found herself trapped between his body and the wall. Please, she whispered, please don't do this. But the man staring back at her wasn't the charming prince who had wooed her family or the gentle fiancé who had written her poetry. This was someone consumed by a rage that had been building for generations. Every Al-Qadi man who had been taught that honor mattered more than human life. Tarek's hands found her throat. His thumbs pressed against the soft hollows beneath her jaw, cutting off her air supply with methodical precision. Samira clawed at his arms, leaving deep scratches, but his grip only tightened. Her vision started to fade. The glittering city lights beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows blurred into streaks of color. Her last coherent thought was of her mother, sitting in their garden in Doha, reading poetry under the afternoon sun. The cashmere sapphire ring on her finger caught the candlelight one final time before her hand fell limp. Tarek held his grip until her body went completely still, then stepped back and let her collapse onto the Persian carpet. Samira Nahar Al-Qadi, bride, daughter, dreamer, was dead at 26 years old, killed by the man who had promised to love and protect her forever. The silence that followed was deafening. Reality crashed down on Tarek the moment Samira's body hit the floor. The rage that had consumed him for the past 10 minutes evaporated, replaced by cold terror. He stared at his wife's lifeless form, her champagne silk robe spread around her like wings, and realized there was no taking back what he had just done. His hands were shaking as he knelt beside her, pressing his fingers against her neck, searching desperately for a pulse that wasn't there. Her skin was already growing cold. The scratches she had left on his forearms burned like brands, physical evidence of her final struggle. Panic set in. Tarek stumbled to the marble bathroom and splashed cold water on his face, trying to think clearly. In the mirror, he saw a killer staring back, sweat-stained formal robes, wild eyes, and purple finger-shaped bruises on his arms where Samira had fought for her life. He had maybe minutes before hotel staff would expect to hear from the newlyweds. maybe an hour before someone would check on them. He needed a plan, and he needed it now. Tariq rushed back to the bedroom and grabbed Samira's phone from where it had landed near the shattered crystal. Arjun was calling again, the third attempt in 5 minutes. Tariq silenced the device and shoved it under a couch cushion, as if hiding the evidence could make the truth disappear. The training kicked in then. Years of security briefings from palace protection officers who had taught him emergency protocols. If you're ever in real danger, they had said, hit the panic button and help will come immediately. Tariq lunged for the bedside control panel and slammed his palm against the red emergency alert. Alarms started blaring throughout the hotel's security center 60 floors below. 3 minutes later, the penthouse elevator opened and 4 security officers rushed into the suite, followed by paramedics carrying defibrillation equipment. They found Tariq kneeling beside his wife, tears streaming down his face. She collapsed, he sobbed. We were talking and she just collapsed. I don't know what happened. Please help her. What do you think? Was this premeditated or a crime of passion? Your thoughts in the comments help me understand my audience better. The paramedics took over immediately. They checked Samira's pulse, started CPR, injected adrenaline directly into her heart. For 20 minutes they worked frantically while Tariq watched from across the room, playing the role of desperate husband perfectly. But experienced paramedics know what strangulation looks like. The burst blood vessels in Samira's eyes, the bruising around her throat, the way her body had fallen, none of it matched Tariq's story about a sudden collapse. They declared her dead at 2:58 a.m. Within an hour, the Dubai Police Criminal Investigation Department had cordoned off the entire 56th floor. Lieutenant Adil Sakar, a 20-year veteran of homicide investigations, took one look at the scene and knew they were dealing with murder, not a medical emergency. The evidence was everywhere once you knew how to look for it. Rose petals soaked with perspiration and tears. Furniture knocked askew during Samira's desperate flight. Fragments of crystal and electronics scattered across expensive marble. Most damning of all, bloody footprints leading from the body to the bathroom and back, Tariq's footprints, left by the scratches Samira had inflicted. Crime scene photographers worked through the night, documenting every detail. When they sprayed luminol across the suite, invisible handprints appeared on pillowcases and wall surfaces, evidence of the violent struggle Tariq claimed never happened. The digital forensics team recovered Samira's phone and immediately accessed her recent communications. The conversation with Arjun told the complete story. The Oxford marriage, the annulment, the secret Samira had carried for 3 years, and most importantly, Tariq's Google searches from earlier that evening. At 11:47 p.m., while wedding guests were still dancing, Tariq had searched annulment versus divorce Islamic law. At 12:33 a.m., he had looked up wife previous marriage consequences. At 1:15 a.m., just minutes before discovering the truth, his final search was honor-killing legal defense UAE. The case was solved before sunrise. Tariq's story crumbled under the weight of physical evidence, digital records, and witness testimony from hotel staff who had heard raised voices through the penthouse walls. By 6 a.m., Sheikh Tariq bin Hamad al-Qadi was in handcuffs, charged with first-degree murder. The trial of Sheikh Tariq bin Hamad al-Qadi became the most watched criminal case in UAE history. International media descended on Dubai as the proceedings began 6 months after Samira's murder. This wasn't just about one man's crime. It was about whether wealth and royal connections could still buy immunity from justice. Tariq's legal team cost his family over $8 million. They brought in experts from London, New York, and Cairo, all trying to find a way to save him from life in prison. Their strategy was predictable. Claim temporary insanity triggered by discovering his wife's deception. The defense lawyers painted Samira as a manipulative woman who had destroyed an honorable man through her lies. They argued that Tariq's violent reaction was understandable given his cultural background and family expectations. In their version of events, he was as much a victim as his dead wife. Prosecutor Fatima Al-Zahra demolished that argument piece by piece. She presented the Google searches Tariq had conducted, proving premeditation. She showed the jury photographs of Samira's injuries, demonstrating the calculated brutality of the attack. Most powerfully, she played audio from the hotel's security system that captured Samira's final pleas for mercy. This was not a moment of passion, Alzara told the three-judge panel. This was an execution carried out by a man who believed his honor mattered more than his wife's life. The evidence was overwhelming. Tariq's own text message to his cousin, sent 3 hours before the wedding ceremony, proved his intentions. "Tonight I will learn who my wife really is." Digital forensics showed he had hired a private investigator to dig deeper into Samira's background just days before the marriage. When the judges delivered their verdict, Tariq showed no emotion. Guilty of first-degree murder. Life imprisonment, 25 years under UAE law. Complete forfeiture of all property that had been designated for Samira, including the massive deferred dowry payment. But the financial punishment extended far beyond Tariq himself. The Al-Qadi family lost business partnerships worth over $200 million as companies refused to associate with a family that had produced a wife killer. 3 major construction projects in Abu Dhabi were cancelled when investors pulled out. Samira's family received $43 million in blood money, compensation that felt hollow compared to the daughter they had lost. Her mother used part of the settlement to establish the Samira Foundation, providing legal aid to women seeking divorces or annulments without family retaliation. The case triggered immediate legal reforms across the Gulf region. The UAE updated its domestic violence laws, making it easier for women to report abuse without family consent. Qatar strengthened penalties for honor-based violence. Even Saudi Arabia referenced the case when expanding women's legal rights. Stories like these matter because they create change. If you believe in justice for victims like Samira, subscribing is the least you can do to support this work. Religious authorities across the Middle East issued statements condemning Tariq's actions. The Grand Mufti of Dubai declared that Islamic law never justified murdering a spouse over past relationships that had been properly dissolved. International human rights organizations used Samira's case to pressure other Gulf nations to strengthen protections for women facing family violence. Her death became a catalyst for changes that potentially saved thousands of other lives. Today, Tariq sits in Al-Ar Central Prison, where he will remain until 2044. His family has disowned him. His business empire collapsed. His name, once synonymous with honor and nobility, is now forever linked with cowardice and murder. Samira Nahar's legacy lives on through the laws that bear her influence and the women whose lives were saved by the changes her death demanded. Samira's murder teaches us 4 critical lessons that could save lives. Maybe even yours or someone you love. First lesson: impossible standards create killers. Tariq wasn't born a murderer. He was raised in a system that taught him his wife needed to be perfect while he was allowed to be flawed. Think about the contradiction. He could have relationships, make mistakes, even hire prostitutes during business trips, but Samira's 4-month marriage from 3 years earlier was grounds for execution. This double standard exists in relationships everywhere, not just in traditional cultures. How many people do you know who demand perfect partners while excusing their own past? When we create impossible standards for others, we're building the foundation for violence. Second lesson: secrets become weapons when communication dies. Samira kept her past hidden because she was afraid of Tariq's reaction. Her fear was justified. He killed her. But here's the tragedy. If she had told him the truth during their engagement, she might still be alive today. Not because he would have accepted it, but because she could have walked away when he showed his true colors. Secrets don't protect relationships. They make them more dangerous. When you can't tell your partner the truth about your past, you're not in a safe relationship. Third lesson: cultural pressure can be deadly, but it's not an excuse. Yes, Tariq faced enormous pressure to maintain his family's honor. Yes, he was raised to believe his reputation mattered more than human life. But millions of men from similar backgrounds managed to live without murdering their wives. Culture might explain his mindset, but it doesn't excuse his choices. The moment Tariq decided violence was acceptable, he stopped being a victim of his upbringing and became a predator. Fourth lesson: love doesn't conquer all, compatibility does. Samira genuinely fell in love with Tariq during their engagement. She believed their connection was strong enough to overcome any obstacles. But love without shared values is just infatuation waiting to turn toxic. If your partner believes they have the right to punish you for your past, that's not love, that's ownership. Real love includes acceptance of who you were before the relationship began. Here's what makes this case so terrifying. Samira did everything right, according to society's rules. She ended her first marriage properly, kept quiet about it to protect everyone involved, and chose a second husband her family approved of. She followed every expectation placed on women in her position, and it still got her killed. If you're someone who won't subscribe, at least tell me why in the comments. I genuinely want to understand what's holding you back from supporting this channel. The real lesson here isn't about marriage contracts or cultural differences. It's about recognizing when someone views you as property instead of a person. Tariq didn't kill Samira because she had been married before. He killed her because he believed he owned her, and ownership had been damaged. That mindset exists everywhere, in every culture, waiting for the right trigger to turn deadly. 5 years after Samira's murder, her impact continues to ripple across the world. The Azerbaijan hotel replaced every piece of furniture in the penthouse suite, but guests still report an unusual stillness in room 5601, as if the space itself remembers what happened there. Her story has been translated into 17 languages and studied in law schools from Cairo to London. Domestic violence counselors use her case to teach women how to recognize the warning signs of possessive partners. Marriage mediators reference her tragedy when helping couples navigate difficult conversations about their pasts. The Samira Foundation has grown into a major force for legal reform. They've helped over 3,000 women escape dangerous marriages and funded law changes in 12 countries. Every woman who walks free because of stronger legal protections carries a piece of Samira's legacy with her. But the most important lesson from this case isn't about laws or cultural change. It's about the choices each of us makes in our own relationships. If someone in your life believes they have the right to punish you for your past, get help immediately. If your partner's love comes with conditions about who you used to be, that's not love. That's control waiting to turn violent. If you're hiding parts of your history because you're afraid of your partner's reaction, you're not in a safe relationship. Samira's tragedy proves that no amount of wealth, education, or social status can protect you from someone who views you as property. But knowledge can. Awareness can. The courage to demand better can. Every time someone chooses to leave a controlling relationship, Samira's death means something. Every time parents teach their children that love requires respect, her story serves its purpose. Every time we refuse to accept that honor matters more than human life, we honor her memory. Thank you for staying with me through Samira's story. If this opened your eyes like it did mine, smash that like button, subscribe for more untold stories, and hit the notification bell so you never miss when I expose the truth. Remember, you deserve love that celebrates who you are, not love that demands you erase who you were. See you in the next one.